Graphic design? Can you make a living at that?
Three, two, one, fun, 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 fun.
Welcome to Design Futures, a show about what happens after design school. I'm Chris St. Cyr, and my guest on this episode is Krystal Hinckley. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you, Chris.
Oh, it's great to see me. Krystal is the director of user experience at Upside Collective, where she, directs user experiences for the agency's clients, such as Mohawk Hudson Humane Society, Business Council of New York State, and the Office of the New York State Attorney General. And finally, she is a 2015 graduate of the Sage Colleges. There you go. You've been busy. I looked at some of those websites. They're not small.
They are not small, no.
They're not small. Okay, so let's start with that. You're a director. What is a director of user experience? Because it sounds like a lot.
Well, all right. First of all, titles. What's in a title, Chris?
I don't know.
It's interesting, especially with my position at Upside. To become director of user experience, I mean, I was also the junior user experience designer. I've been the only user experience designer. So I've kind of like climbed up my own ranks. There was no competition there. So really, it just kind of encapsulates the growth that I've had personally as a user experience designer and a web designer and just a designer in general. My day-to-day, I guess, what you could consider what I do, everything from like user research to the content strategy to developing the information architecture, the UI design system, the visual component design, page layout design, documentation for developer handoff, content porting, content migration, client training of how to use their content management. It's everything that's involved with user experience.
That sounds like a lot. So there's a lot of content. Do you have somebody who might edit that content if it needs to be updated or refreshed?
We do have two like content or copywriters at Upside that I partner with a lot on projects. Yeah. You know, we have copywriters who will edit it, and once I go through the design and I see, what content strategy is needed that didn't exist before, I give them the copy that exists, right, that I know like is on their existing site that might go into the new site and be like, listen, we need to rewrite this just for general like layout to fit into the new layout, or, accessibility, how are we writing these things? But when it comes to like coordinating with the client themselves, I mean, I've spent a lot of time the last couple of weeks, not necessarily in a design kind of phase, but I'm more like managing that content. I'm giving these clients the documents and like giving them work to do. Like, here's these top 5 pages, review your content here, give it back to me in 2 weeks. Here's the next set of pages, review your content, give me new headshots, give me new virtual tour files, stuff like that.
Yeah. Clients have to do the work too, or do some of the work too.
Yeah. And they're always surprised when you tell them like that you need them to put in the effort too.
Yeah. Like they're the experts in their content, right? Yeah. I mean, how is designing for Drupal different like than WordPress or Squarespace?
It's kind of a lot like thinking about designing for different shared languages. The overall system that we work in would be Drupal. Our developers building in Drupal would put together, it's called Drupal paragraphs. Paragraphs equate to components, like visual design components. So your card system, your UI patterns, like those kind of relate to the Drupal paragraphs. And then when I think about like, there are things in Drupal called content types. So you can group content together to put into a page, or like it would basically be a template. So a content type is kind of like what a template is. So when I would like, if I am to design pages to present to a client, like page layouts to present to a client, I also have to explain, like, I'm only presenting you 5-page layouts, but those will relate to all of the available content types that you could potentially build your site with, along with the, you know, infinite possibilities and of combinations of components.
And that design presentation to a client, what's the challenge for showing them a design and doing what you're just talking about, like explaining to them there's an infinite amount of possibilities and I can't show you even close to, you know, half of that? Do you still get pushback like, well, I want to see this and this version and what that page would look like? And how do you deal with that? Because it's just like endless.
I think I've kind of locked in a workflow for that over the years, because it is hard for people to understand that and to even consider the possibilities. Instead of like showing a client 3 different visual designs for a website, I will show them one design with all of the potential highly different pages. So, you know, your homepage is always going to be a combination of components that will never be combined in the same way on any of the other pages.
Right.
You'll usually have like a basic text heavy informational page. That's going to look completely different than, say, like a service specific like landing page.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of learned to show all of the potential highly different pages.
Yeah.
And that can vary per client. Like, we never say I'm going to show you 5-page layouts. It's going to be, I'm going to do the, you know, the content strategy up front. I'm going to do the information architecture up front. And that's going to tell me like what pages I'm going to start, like in my head, putting together what those pages are that are going to be vastly different in layout and content. Some are going to be text heavy, some are going to be image heavy. So when I go to the wireframe stage, I will lay out those pages. And that kind of allows me to, when I'm presenting, to say, all right, you're seeing how these components are working on this page. I'm going to show you the next page. You're going to see some of the same components from the other page, but also a couple of new ones.
Right.
And that kind of helps me tell the story of, like, you know, start to envision how some of these things are going to be used in different areas. It's a fun challenge too when I'm designing for this. It's really like, how can I create the least number of components and also accomplish the most with the least?
Right. Yeah. Let's take a look at some of these projects, because I'm sort of amazed at like the scale of some of these that you've worked on. Like, so this is the one, the Attorney General's Office for the state of New York. I remember we talked before. You said, remind me again, how long did you work on this project for? Like, how it was like years, right?
2 years. Yeah.
2 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
This was the pandemic project.
Oh, yeah.
I worked from home. You'll see that photo right there. You know, early information architecture stages were done in my living room, the whiteboard that I don't even know where I pulled that out of. Like, it has carried me through many years. Yes.
What, this piano's not the Upside Collective office with the cat? That's your cat.
That is.
Which you have 3 cats. Which one's this?
I have 3. That one is Eve's.
Eve's.
Which, ironically, the font on the Attorney General website is Mr. Eve's. So it all works out.
The cats are helping out with information architecture. Yeah, yep. This looks like a lot. So at this stage, are you just doing all this on your own? Does a client come in at some point and you kind of move things around, reorganize, or?
So when I got to that like whiteboarding phase, that's what took a lot of time at first, was just simply understanding the Attorney General's internal structure. You know, they're made up of a bunch of bureaus. So I think we had breakout calls at the beginning with the 8 different divisions to kind of get their, you know, what they wanted to get out of the website, explain what they do within the Attorney General, how the public interacts with them or doesn't interact with them. Their old website was organized by the bureau. So all of this content was you'd have to filter down into the website knowing that things were owned by the
Right.
Consumer Frauds Bureau.
Right.
The general public wouldn't know that.
Exactly. Right.
And
Yeah.
that was my biggest challenge, was I had to understand the bureaus in order to deconstruct them. After those initial discussions with the bureaus, I then had to pull out and like organize, all right, Consumer Frauds Bureau handles this, this, and this, but then also the Environmental Frauds Bureau handles that as well. So finding those common threads between and across the bureaus, and then pulling those out into more like public understanding, like headlines. So instead of
Right.
Consumer Frauds Bureau, it's consumer issues. That's
Right.
more of a standard language.
In this sitemap, you have like, I want to, right? So that's from the perspective of the user, right? The
Yeah.
citizen going to this website, right?
Yeah, one of their early complaints was that it was just so hard to direct people. They had an entire bureau set up for people who were calling and asking, how do I access this? Where do I find this? So a lot of like the common actions were just buried within bureau owned pages. And so, I proposed that action menu of like the top things that people are calling to do do on the website or can't find on the website, pull that out into an I want to menu.
And then so there's like the design system, you're doing all this too, like color, type, all the UI components.
Yep. Yeah, the Attorney General had a designer on staff who developed pretty recently, they developed a design brand guideline. So I was given a lot of those, the colors and the fonts to use. I did have to spend some time kind of working with them to modify the colors just based on, contrast and accessibility. Some of their blues weren't really working. I had to eliminate a couple of like colors. We went back and forth on that yellow gold color because yellows, I don't know why, but I keep attracting clients that have yellow in their brand. And I'm like, you make this so hard for me.
Yeah.
Yellows are so hard.
So so that's an interesting challenge. Right? You get maybe the visual brand guidelines, but then if like those guidelines, a lot of times they won't show you kind of some application to like this kind of thing. We're looking at like some UI components, right? It might have some simple applications, but it probably wouldn't be built out to this. So you have to go and create your own versions, right?
Yeah, really, I was just given the, here are our colors, here are our fonts. They had kind of an example of how to use or how they were using like heading styles and subheading styles, which
Right.
I couldn't completely, replicate for the web, but it gave me an idea of where to start. And then a lot of the other visual elements, I was just looking at like how they were designing social media posts, how they were designing like their e-newsletter. And, luckily a lot of these calls that we were having, this was the 2-call-a-week client. The designer was on those calls. So her and I worked really closely at the early stages of the project to kind of develop that visual language and to make sure that what I created for the web was something that she could then, implement and carry elements through to, the social media graphics that she's designing and the publication reports that she's putting out.
So do you feel like you got a law degree working on this website? I don't know. Do you know more about New York State law than most designers now?
I mean, knowing absolutely nothing about the Attorney General before going into this, like didn't even know what they did. I can definitely tell you a little bit more, at least.
A little bit more.
I still don't know what an amicus curiae thing is, but I tagged an entire document library of amicus documents.
I'll have to put that in the show notes because I don't know what that is either.
Sure.
So what's the Business Council of New York State? So this is another project, not as big as the Attorney General, maybe bigger. I don't know.
So this one, we're getting on 4 or 5 years old now for this one. At the time, it was the biggest website that I had worked on. A lot of the sites prior to that had been, manageable, kind of like brochure portfolio size, maybe a little bit larger. But this was the first time I had ever really sat down and had to work on an information architecture of this scale. This was like, at the time, it felt like the Attorney General site to me. If we're going back 5 years ago, I had finally kind of realized that user experience and web design was the niche I was going to have for myself within Upside. And this was kind of like that first major project that I worked on, having, declared myself the web designer.
So let's look at the Mohawk Hudson Humane Society. Is that blue and yellow too? Wait, that's blue and
Yeah.
yellow too. What
Yeah.
the?
The worst part is I got to decide the colors on this.
You just like you couldn't get away from it. You're
No.
like, it's stuck in my head.
There's a good story to this one, because the Humane Society, they didn't have a design. They had their logo. That was all I had to go off of. But the redesign of the website coincided with the opening of their new, animal center. They had, built a brand new location, and we got to go in and tour it. And this was my like color inspiration. And it was based on when I toured there for the first time and walked through, I took pictures of every single wall that they had, because they had all of these walls painted this like nice lavender color, this mint green. They had like paw prints on the floor that were like blue and orange. So I was like, okay, I'm snapping pictures, getting color inspiration. And that was what was interesting about this website. Was it was the first time I felt like I got to tie a physical experience with a digital experience.
Oh yeah.
Because a lot of the sites that I have worked on don't really have that physical component to them. And the Humane Society is all about, walking in, seeing the animals, interacting with the staff. So, I wanted to make sure that the visual of the website gave the same feel and vibe if you just walked through the front door.
Oh yeah, that's definitely something to know. Yeah, and you were saying earlier, before we started, that as a result of this project, you got a cat. You adopted.
I did. So it's no secret I'm a cat person. I have a cat tattoo on my arm of my one cat. Working on this and looking at the animal feed all day long.
Oh yeah.
And then, we made multiple in-person visits to the location. I was on location when they had a photographer shooting for the website. So, I'm just looking around, I'm just browsing. And then I see that they were having, I think it was like a St. Patrick's Day adoption event. And I told my husband about it. Just, like, haha, wouldn't that be funny if we did that?
And then you already and then you went.
And then we went, and then we came home with, his name is Mo.
Mo. And was that the first cat, or?
No, he completed our family. He's our third cat.
Oh, wow. So that's a lot of work, a lot of website work, a lot of individual work on your part. One of the questions that I am always curious about with former students is, and you sort of mentioned, maybe it happened on the job. You worked on it was the business council website. You're like, this is my job. This is my role here at Upside. Did you have a sense of that in school?
Well, it's interesting. And I've reflected on this, because I've thought the same thing too. Like, how did I end up here?
Yeah.
When you're in the thick of a 2-year website, you're like, why did I do this? Why am I here? Really, I was more focused and interested in print layout, honestly, in school. And I realized I'm an analytical person stuck in a creative's body. Like, I think that is what it all really boils down to, is I love the analytical part of things. When I was doing page design and learning InDesign, even back in high school, like I took a graphic design class, and all of my peers were like obsessing over Photoshop and Illustrator and, making these super cool photo edits. And I'm like, yeah, but have you seen paragraph styles?
Wow, you were that nerd in high school. You're like, wow,
I mean, I wouldn't be doing information architecture and crazy sites like this if I didn't love the idea of organizing content together, finding patterns in anything and putting those patterns together. And I've loved that ever since, I knew what paragraph styles and character styles and InDesign were. And I mean, when you think about it, it's like paragraph styles and character styles and InDesign, that was just the appetizer to a design system.
Yeah. So were there projects at Sage? Like, was there like did we work on a magazine project, or was there some project like that?
It was interesting with my class. I know we had you, like my graduating class, we had you for print layout.
Yeah.
You taught us layout. And I had a little bit of that already coming from high school. And a lot of my peers were not that interested in layout. They weren't grasping InDesign as much as I was like, yeah, this makes sense, guys. This is great. So I loved pretty much any project that involved, booklet layout, magazine spread layout, creating anything like that. And that kind of led to I think at this point you had moved on from Sage, but I took over control of the vernacular, the student-run publication my senior year.
Yeah.
Because I was really the only one who had any interest in, major paged layout, creation.
Yeah, I was looking through doing some research, looking at on Instagram, and I scrolled all the way back and I saw a photo.
Yeah.
Do you know what photo I'm talking about? It's like you're all like
shoved into a van.
Yeah, you're all like there's like a crowd of people all in a van, and you're like right in the center.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, we went to Boston. Like I remember setting up one because I knew one of the like a designer. I mean, I know plenty of people there, but we went to visit one studio. I can't remember where else we went. I think most people just wanted to go shopping or something like that.
I feel like we did a couple of like studio tours, like maybe 2 or 3, and then we went to the aquarium.
Oh, right. Yeah. When you were in school, you did an internship at Saratoga Automobile Museum?
I did. Wow, you really went back into
well, I got to do my research, So what did you do at that internship?
So, I mean, I'm like not a car person, but I am from Saratoga. So when I was in school, it made sense to do an internship in my hometown. And when I was there, it was perfect timing. They were just wrapping up one exhibit and getting ready to open a new exhibit. So I worked on like wayfinding designs and merch and like exhibit like wall plaques for a Mustang 40th something about Mustangs. I don't know.
Something about Mustangs.
Didn't learn anything about Mustangs after that, but I did cut out a lot of Mustang illustrations, removed the background on so many Mustangs.
Very cool. Yeah, that sounds like it would be a fun internship. I mean,
it was interesting because I've never like thought about design in scale and like human interaction of like something. So like the wayfinding designs were like at a scale that I had never worked on when I was at school before. So, thinking of you have to create something that will actually move a person through a space. That was a really cool thing to learn as a wee little student.
Fun fact, I did a museum internship when I was in college.
I love museums.
Yeah. I thought it was totally fun. We were, there was art directors. I was learning in that way, but like, I don't know. I like the vibe of the museum. It's kind of fun. Okay. So one other question about school. We talked about like how some of your interest in school or even before college, how that relates to what you're doing now. What about things that you experience these days as somebody who's been working the field? Like, what are things that you think should be in school now? Like what didn't you learn? You learned on the job.
I could go in 2 different directions with this. I could go the obvious direction,
which is what?
Accessibility. I don't know if that was just like that might be something that's being taught now, just because it is becoming more of a consideration, and it's
Right.
coming up a lot more. But obviously that wasn't something that was talked about in 2014, 2015 as much as it is. So, because I think accessibility is not just applicable for the web. Any graphic designer should understand the basic concept of contrast and scale, and considering color blindness and disabilities in anything that they create. Even logo designers should understand that. And I think that's the easy answer.
Yeah.
But something that I have realized, that being able to communicate to clients and be considerate of clients, and that one-on-one personal interfacing with other humans, how to conduct yourself with another person, is something that maybe just isn't even told as a consideration.
Do you feel like that didn't come through in like class critiques or conversations about design with classmates, or is that not just like you weren't thinking about those interactions in that way?
I think when you're in school, it's such a narrow focus and a narrow group of people that you're interacting with. You're always seeing the same,
Right.
peers, you're seeing the same professors. You kind of know how to, I would know how to approach you versus how I would approach, my art history professor, different people. But, I think, and at Sage, we got a little bit of that in our capstone when we would present our formal capstone to an open auditorium. You have to kind of know how to cater and tailor your presentation voice, and your just general, like, how you're going to respond to questions, how you're going to take critique, how you're just going to like hold yourself.
Yeah, I really thought that was a valuable part of that experience.
I think it helped a lot. And, I almost do this to a fault sometimes, where if I'm presenting, I over contextualize. Like, I give context to everything that I say. And, I think that I learned that when I was presenting for the capstones. It's like, anytime I presented, the group of people who would show up would be different each time. So I'd have to assume that nobody or everybody there knew nothing, even though, it might be people who were there last time. Always just give context and give extra additional information.
How did you get to Sage? Like, what happened before Sage? Were you taking art classes in high school all throughout? Did you know that you want to study design in college? Like, how did you get from high school to college in terms of like studying design?
I knew pretty quick in high school, as soon as I took that graphic design class in high school. I mean, I had also been taking like a film photography class, so I knew it was either going to be design or photography. Like, that was, I fell in love as soon as I was in both. Like, especially the film photography class, I loved the ability to like do the hands-on development, in the darkroom. That was great. But I pretty much knew once I took both of those classes, I was like, all right, this is the direction I'm gonna go. And like I said, I grew up right outside of Saratoga, went to Saratoga High School, knew I didn't want to go too far from home. So then I looked at St. Rose and Sage, and I toured both, and I just ended up at Sage. I had a cat at the time whose name was Sage. It all comes back to cats.
It's all about cats.
Influence my decision, I swear.
Oh my God. It's all about cats. So, wow. So what was the high school, like, was your high school class actually an actual graphic design class?
I believe it was called graphic arts. My high school professor was Mr. Hogan. I just absorbed everything he told me about, early Adobe, Adobe, what, 5? I don't know, Photoshop 5. I don't remember what I was using then.
So other things going on in your life. So aside from work, you have all these other projects. Mainly, though, what I get a sense from talking to you and again seeing photos, is like your house project, your old house. It's Instagram says old houses and cats. So we've talked a little bit about cats. You have 3 cats. You adopted one based on a website project.
Yes.
So what's this house is this the house you're in right now that I see you in?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. So my husband and I bought a house in 2017. It was an old house. We weren't seeking an old house. We were seeking something we could afford, basically.
As you should, yes.
But this was the first house that we walked into on the first day that we were touring houses with our agent, and fell in love immediately. It's a 130 plus. I'm not going to do the math, but I think it was 1896 was when it was built. Like I said, we had no prior interest in old houses, but as soon as we bought it and I got into it, like, I obsessed over the patterns that I found in like the floor registers, the cast iron floor registers with their intricate detail. I learned all of the terminology for all of the things. So like the brackets on the outside of the eaves, I was like, this is nothing like what you can get today. This is all so cool. And I just like dove right into learning house history, like hardcore.
So the house history and maybe the projects that go with being a homeowner, do you find it a relief from work, or does it create some stress?
I mean, like I said, we've been here since 2017, and nobody's allowed upstairs. It's still undone. We stripped our stairs because, you have an old house and it's painted. You're like, okay, well, there's got to be really nice wood under this paint. Right. So 3 years ago, we decided to strip the paint off of the stairs before realizing how horrible stripping paint is. How hard it is, and especially like with the details in the spindles and the details in like the finial and the posts. You have to get like tiny little like dental tools to get the paint out of like the little cracks and crevices. And I hate fiddly, like detailed, repetitive motions like that.
Oh, there's a lot in that kind of architecture, though, from the late 1800s.
Yeah, so we started stripping the stairs 3 years ago. We are just now finishing the project. Every year we're like, we'll get to that. We should probably finish those this year.
Yeah, I saw another photo about your roof. You're an adult when you get excited about a new roof.
We got a new roof. We got new gutters, and I'm like going around telling everybody about my gutters, and I'm like, oh no, I've reached that part of life.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I had a few years ago had a utility sink put in downstairs in the basement, like next to the
everything
next to the washer and dryer, and I was like, that is the best money I've spent in a long time. Like, wow, what am I talking about? That is so boring. And like, I can think of 1,000 other things I'd rather spend that money on, but it's so useful. That's why they call it a utility sink, I guess. Your old Victorian home is taking up a what's it called?
Yeah, it's a Victorian, but it's called a folk Victorian because it's not as flashy or fancy as like a Queen Anne Victorian, which is what most people think of when they think of like Victorian houses.
Very cool. I'll have to come by and see it. All right, it's time for the pop quiz. Are you ready?
Sure.
You work in web design. Most people think of that as like digital, lots of digital stuff, gadgets and things. What's your workstation setup like?
Oh yeah. Laptop, second monitor. I actually custom built a desk for my work from home setup because I am also a paper person. I have about 4 different notebooks and a million different pens over here. So simple 2 monitors and a bunch of papers.
Got it. Favorite thing about upstate New York?
Ooh, being able to go outside at night and hear peepers. Like the little frogs, little peepers.
The little peepers, yeah, little frogs. Yeah. All right, yeah, nice. Nature.
Sketchbook,
blank or gridded?
Ooh, oh, depends on what I'm using it for. Notes need to be lined. Also, the notebook needs to be spiral bound. But if I'm sketching, gridded.
Okay. Type or image?
In what context?
Doesn't matter. I don't know. There's no context. Type or image?
Type.
Type. Okay. Instagram says old houses and cats. I'm saying old houses or cats. Which one are you going to choose?
You're gonna end on that note?
No, there are other questions, but you gotta choose one. You gotta choose one.
Cats.
Cats. So a new house and cats would be fine. Old house and no cats, not good.
Yeah.
All right. I knew you'd pick cats. So free range outdoor cats or loungy indoor cats?
Oh, loungy indoor. I am a loungy indoor cat.
Okay. Just on your lap, nice and chill. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I prefer those kind too. Do you listen to music while you're working?
Sometimes.
Yeah, what do you listen to?
Well, if I'm doing something mindless, like if I'm doing content porting or content migration, I will listen to like indie, something that I actually like care about the lyrics to and want to like, get in my feels about. If I'm doing something urgent that requires, a lot of like, maybe I'm in spreadsheets all the time. Spreadsheets I usually listen to like metalcore. I don't know why. But there's just that emotion.
Interesting. All right. Paint or wallpaper?
That's a tough one because I stripped a lot of wallpaper and now I want to put it back. So 4 years ago, I would have said paint, but now I am fully on the wallpaper train.
I would have guessed that. I mean, you're in that Victorian, so you gotta have some wallpaper somewhere, at least on an accent wall or something.
We do, yeah. We left some original wallpaper, but we stripped the wallpaper that they added in the 80s. Ugh.
Oh yeah, sure. All right, UX or UI?
UX.
There's that analytical person in there. All right, last question in the quiz is: if you weren't a designer, what would you be?
Ooh, this is a fun one. I would love to be, although it's slightly related, an archivist, like working in a museum, like hands-on. I want to like tag and archive and I want to do UX, but hands-on in a museum. I want to
like the glasses that like at the bottom of your nose, and you got the white gloves.
Yeah,
right.
I'd also love being a librarian. If I didn't have to pay to go back to school, I would love to be a librarian.
That totally makes sense with what you do right now. There's so much overlap there. Totally get it. Yep. All right. Your final thoughts for the aspiring designers out there. You got any wisdom you want to share with them? Things they should think about or do at early stages?
I guess don't be afraid that, or don't think that your knowledge ends with your education. I completely taught myself on the job how to be a user experience designer. I mean, and that is a common story that I've heard from many people that are in the field. Be interested in something and then teach yourself whenever you can, whether it's on the job, after hours, put in that work and kind of just continue being interested and wanting to learn more.
Yeah. Absolutely agree with that. We're always students, right? Hopefully we're always learning. Yeah, it doesn't just end when you get the degree, the piece of paper, right?
No.
It was great to catch up with you. Next time I have a question about New York State law or old Victorian homes, I know who I'm going to contact.
I can probably answer that second one a little bit better.
All right. It was great talking to you, hearing all about what you've been up to. You're local. We're close by. We got to get coffee sometime.
Definitely. I know all of the coffee spots.
All right. It was great to see you, Krystal.
Likewise, Chris.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
So what do we learn from Krystal? Number one, get to know all the people that are part of a project, the developers, the content creators, anybody, especially the clients. And number two, embrace paragraph styles, character styles, graphic styles, all the styles. It will certainly save you some time and keep your design consistent. Thanks to Krystal Hinckley of Upside Collective. If you have any comments or questions for me or any of my guests, please leave them in the comments. And subscribe so you can catch the next episode of Design Futures. Until next time, go learn something. Your future depends on it. Thanks for listening. See ya.